सब्सक्राइब करें और बेल दबाएं ताकि कोई खबर रह न जाए।
अस्सलाम वालेकुम, आप देख रहे हैं प्रोग्राम बोल आदिल अब्बासी के साथ। मैं हूं अमेरिका वाशिंगटन डीसी से आपसे मुखातिब हूं, जहां पर बहुत सारी डेवलपमेंट्स हो रही हैं अमरीकी सदर के ओथ लेने के बाद। ज़ाहिर है दुनिया को बहुत सारे पैगाम जा रहे हैं, बहुत सारी सिग्नलिंग हो रही है और अमरीका पाकिस्तान के लिए और पाकिस्तान अमरीका के लिए बहुत अहम होते थे। लेकिन अब क्या सिचुएशन है? अब पाकिस्तान को क्या करना है? अमरीका पाकिस्तान के साथ उस रीजन में कैसे ताल्लुकात रखेगा? हम स्पेशल अपने जो एपिसोड्स हैं इस सिलसिले में अमेरिका से बैठकर कर रहे हैं या लोगों से बात कर रहे हैं। ज़ाहिर है यहाँ पर हमारी मुलाकातें पॉलिटिशियंस के साथ हुई हैं, यहाँ पर हमारी मुलाकातें जो है वो थिंक टैंक्स के साथ हुई हैं, यहाँ पर हमारी मुलाकातें जो है वो मीडिया के लोगों के साथ हुई हैं और हमारी मुलाकातों में टेक के एक्सपर्ट्स और दीगर इंडस्ट्री के एक्सपर्ट्स भी जो है वो शामिल हैं। तो हम उनसे बात कर रहे हैं और ये समझना चाह रहे हैं कि पाकिस्तान के लिए क्या स्कोप है इस सारे प्रोसेस के अंदर। आज हमारे स्पेशल गेस्ट जिनसे हमने बात करनी है वो टेक इंडस्ट्री से उनका ताल्लुक है और हम उनसे कुछ समझेंगे कि पाकिस्तान के लिए कितना इंपॉर्टेंट है कि टेक्नोलॉजी में एडवांसमेंट लाए, अमेरिका से पाकिस्तान की टेक्नोलॉजी का किस तरह फायदा उठा सकता है और ये जो एंटरप्रेन्योर्स होते हैं हमारे मुल्क के या उनके मुल्क के मिलकर कैसे काम कर सकते हैं पीपल टू पीपल कॉन्टेक्ट में। सो टुडे वी have a very special guest, Auren Hoffman, a leading entrepreneur, angel investor, and tech visionary. He's the CEO of SafeGraph, a company specializing in geospatial data, helping business and governments make data-driven decisions with a deep understanding of AI, data analytics, and global technology trends. Auren has been at the forefront of shaping the future of innovation. Today, we will discuss the role of data in international relations, Pak-USA collaboration, and the future of AI and cybersecurity. So let's dive into this insightful conversation with Auren Hoffman. Auren Hoffman, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really grateful to you and welcome to BOL Adil Abbasi.
Honored to be here.
First, I would ask you that how can data analytics enhance trade, security, and cooperation? And if I talk about particularly Pakistan and USA, and I would say that what role do AI and big data play in shaping global diplomacy and economic growth? What is your take on it?
Well, I think AI is going to have a lot of near-term impacts on different countries and different geographies around the world. It will have some negative near-term impacts on anything that's dealing with outsourced call centers, entry-level software development, editors, and other types of assistance. So we definitely should expect AI to have like a near-term negative impact on countries like India or the Philippines. I think with Pakistan it's a little bit unclear, just because Pakistan is still much more atoms than bits, and so probably AI won't have any type of big negative near-term impact, and probably will play like most economies, just have a very, very positive long-term impact like for most economies around the world.
How can data analytics enhance trade, security, and cooperation between Pakistan and the USA?
I have no idea how data analytics is going to help security and cooperation. That's a little bit above my pay grade. I mean, I think the most important thing for things like security and cooperation is having folks work one another and being honest and open with one another with their interests. And sometimes both countries and people are just quite too guarded, or they're playing things too close to their vest, or they're double speaking, and so if you put everything on the table, it's much easier to find a win-win solution with other folks.
Right. So what advice would you give to Pakistani startups looking to expand globally?
Well, I think the most ambitious Pakistani tech founders moved to the U.S. If you think of people like Imad Akund, who's the CEO of Mercury, or Osman Rashid, who's the former CEO of Chegg, these are people who moved to the U.S. The second most ambitious Pakistani tech founder are people who moved to like Canada or the UK, and that's not just true for Pakistan, by the way. It's even true for France. The most ambitious French founders are moving to the U.S. If you think of like the top 50 French tech founders, probably 40 to 45 of them moved to the US. Now, Pakistan itself is a huge market. So, I mean, we have, 250 million people, fifth most populous country in the world. So it probably is worth the time for founders to develop products much more for that particular market. Of course, one of the difficulties, and you know this better than me, but one of the difficulties of operating in the Pakistani market is that a very large percentage of the economy is dominated by a very small number of families, and those families have an interest in not allowing a lot of new competition. So if you're a new entrepreneur, you kind of need one of these families to get on your side. And in a market like the US, you just don't have those same impediments. So as an entrepreneur, you can just move much, much faster.
How do you see the potential of Pakistan's industry in global market?
I mean, if you think of Pakistani tech companies selling abroad, I can't think of one Pakistani tech company that sells products to companies in the US. Literally not one. I'm sure there are some, but I have not come across any. So I think there's just a lot of open space and a lot of opportunities for folks to start things, but you're starting at a very, very, very low base.
How can location data be leveraged for urban and economic development?
Well, all data is very important for any type of economic development. The countries that have the best economic development are the ones that have most truth in their data. So the more governments try to hide things in the data, the more they make things hard to get data, the more it's hard to get data available. Like usually the slower these economies are going to grow. And so you want to have access to as much data as possible. And that could be public data, that could be government data, that could be private data. But data is kind of the lifeblood of being able to get economies moving, to get public services better, to get education better. So in almost every single level of society, whether it's education, healthcare, taxation, transportation, et cetera, housing, data is essential to making that happen. In the US, we're lucky to have a lot of access to data. In countries like Europe, they've kind of gone the other way, so they have less and less access to data, and we're seeing that in slower GDP growth because of it. With just probably more access to data in Europe, you would probably see significantly higher GDP growth. I'm not an expert on Pakistan, but my guess is that the data is still hard to get in Pakistan, and if more data was available, you would see much faster growth.
All right. So what about ethical concerns? What are the ethical concerns surrounding data privacy, and how can international regulations ensure responsible data usage?
I think there's two types of concerns. So if you think of data is always about four nouns. So noun one is people, two is about places, three is about companies, and four is about products. So it's almost always about those four nouns. Sometimes it can be crossed with time, and sometimes it can be crossed with price, but we're almost always data is about those four nouns. The data that's most sensitive, of course, is the data about people. And then there's two types of data about people. There's kind of like data about populations, like GDP per capita would be a data about population. In that case, you don't have like any privacy concerns because it's data about an aggregated group of people. And then, of course, there's data about a specific person. And data about a specific person needs to be highly regulated because that data could be misused, and that data could be used for bad good. Could be, if you think of things like phishing, or there could be lots of other things that you could be doing with that data to not in the interest of that particular person. So those are the things to think about on the data front. On the separate side, then there's also just, governments have their own rules about what data can leave the country, how the data can move in the country, where the data needs to get stored in that country, et cetera. Those are generally rules that are potentially could be in the interest of government, but almost always lead to slower GDP growth of that government. So all governments have to think of different trade-offs. So there might be a security reason to implement that law for that government to go do that. But it comes at a cost of making the economy grow slower.
Mr. Auren, if I ask you that, what are your predictions about AI and data analytics in the next decade?
I think at this point, just because AI is moving so fast that anyone who is really making a prediction 10 years out or even 10 months out doesn't know what they're talking about. Almost everything has changed massively in the last 2.5 years since ChatGPT went live. And we can expect that everything is going to change even more massively in the next 2.5 years. So it is very, very hard to know what is going to change. It's very hard to know where it's going to be good, where it's going to be difficult. One thing we can be sure of is that, it is going to change almost everything that we do. So in the short term, maybe countries like Pakistan don't see as much change, but in the long term, the entire world is going to change. And there's going to be net good things for sure that will happen. We're going to have cheaper medicines. We're going to have better healthcare. We're going to have a lot more creativity. We're going to have a lot more interesting movies and scripts and books and lots of any types of creative things, songs, etc. Those are all going to be net goods for the world. But of course, with any new technology, there could be other undersides that are unintended consequences that might not be so good for the world as well.
So how do you see this development of 500 billion investment of USA in AI? President Trump has announced $500 billion in this particular industry. How do you see this development and what kind of impact it's going to see in future?
I think that shows the power of the American economy and the American innovation. That's $500 billion that the government is not spending. So this is private money, which is going to be developing AI with private funds. And $500 billion is a lot of money. And the only reason that private institutions, and some of them are American, but some of them are not American, obviously one of the lead ones there is Japanese, and there are many other people all over the world who are involved in it. One of the reasons that they're willing to put that much money into America is A, they think that money is safe. B, there's a lot of opportunities for growth in America, et cetera. So it really shows the power of the American economy and the American innovation, whether it's AI, whether it's other types of innovation that's happening on top of the technology stack.
The way Elon Musk is taking, position in the government, the way he has emerged as a new, not only tag, but political leader in American political arena. So what is your opinion about that and the way he's taking all these things? So how do you analyze it?
I generally think it's a good thing that our president is involving some of the most innovative people in the world in his decisions. So Elon Musk is clearly one of the most innovative people in our world today. And you would be a fool as a president to not ask his advice and not get his input into things just because he's such an innovative person and he's really a machine and has and really helped spur the U.S. and global economy and spur innovation worldwide. So I think this president is reaching out to people like Musk and also many, many others. I believe the president is reaching out to tons of innovators and bringing them on and getting them on board. And many of those innovators are people who did not support him in the last election, yet he's still reaching out to them and still getting those people involved, like Sam Altman at OpenAI, who's another amazing innovator. The president has reached out to him, and Sam was not a supporter in the last election. And I think this is in contrast to our last president, who, for whatever reason, was not open to reaching out to these innovators and was not open to asking their advice and asking their help. And I think that was to our last president's detriment. So I think it's generally a good thing for any president or any leader of any country to reach out to innovators and to get their help and get their advice. These are people that really have an opportunity to move things forward. They're real live players in this world. And you'd almost be a fool not to involve those people in what you're trying to do.
Mr. Auren, I have to take a break here. We'll come back right after this short break. Welcome back. We have with us Mr. Auren Hoffman. Recently, we have seen in the news that they have allowed podcasters, content creators to have an access in White House. Their spokesperson recently announced that they'll be welcome to White House. So how do you see this development?
I don't know that that matters that much. I mean, there's a lot of old legacy things in the U.S. And even just it doesn't matter if you're at the press conference or not, because really it doesn't matter if you ask a question as long as you have access to the information. So my guess is that it's still like a legacy thing. It's something that kind of existed 100 years ago and is not that relevant to things today. Just like things like TV news and other types of, at least in America, TV news is less relevant than it used to be. It's mostly watched by people who are over 65 in America. And it's much less relevant than it was in the past. So I do think we are changing our news consumption. We're changing a lot of different types of things about how we access news, how we debate things, how we talk about things, different sources that we trust, et cetera. But watching news is less important today in America. And most people who really want to consume news are probably either listening to it on a podcast or they're reading it. But watching it is almost a dying thing, and most of the people who do it are dying.
So news industry and electronic media is no more relevant in USA. So people, you think that people are more interested?
Old news, TV news, which is kind of the old news, is somewhat of a dying art. Again, like your most of the audience is over 65. In some cases, the audience is over 75. It's a very old audience that's spending time on these things, and they're watching it on linear TV, which is going away. So fewer and fewer people have linear TV in America. So they're still accessing things on linear TV. They're watching the commercials in a linear way. If people are watching things today, they're watching it on connected TV in the US, or they're watching it on YouTube, or they're watching it on other types of connected channels. They're watching it via X, or they're watching it via Facebook or some other types of place if they're watching these things. But more and more, they're not watching it. When they're watching stuff, when they're actually spending time watching stuff, they're watching fiction. They're not watching nonfiction, or they're watching sports. That's what they do when they're watching, or they're watching like short-term videos. And then when they're actually consuming news, they're listening or they're reading. And the best news is still the news that you read. That's the most serious news, is the news that you read. In America, again, that's probably not true in many other countries, because many countries have a different news medium. But in America, the best news is the news that you read.
So there is a serious credibility issue of social media. So how do you interpret this? Because a few people don't believe in this, still don't believe in that whatever information we are getting from social media is correct.
I've never read a news article in my entire life that I had intimate knowledge about that was accurate. It's just very hard to be accurate. So even if the intention of the journalist is to be completely accurate and do a perfect job, it's impossible to do of any type of complicated story that's out there. So you're always going to have news that is incomplete. It's almost always biased. It almost always has an agenda from any source that's out there, whether it's social media, whether it's the New York Times, whether it's any type of source that's out there. It's going to have its own biases. And so a good consumer of news needs to triangulate things, needs to figure things out. And that's why the best consumers of news out there, the gold standard of consuming news, are people who trade on the news. So any type of hedge fund manager, et cetera, they're triangulating because all they care about is the truth. They are trying to trade, and they're trying to get the truth. They're trying to get information, and they're getting news from many different sources, sometimes thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of sources that they need to get, and they need to triangulate to find the truth. If you're only getting news from one place or one source, you're getting that version of the news, and it's going to be a very skewed version, and it will unlikely be the truth. It might be a version you want to hear, which is fine, but it is unlikely to be the true version of what's going on.
Let me ask you a second related question. There are certain checks on electronic media, like editors and director news and so many others, some regulation organizations. But there is no such check on digital media. So even then, do you think that they both have credibility issues, or they have their own biases? Because social media in that way is more powerful and empowered than electronic media. Because in electronic media, we are bound to follow some rules and regulations. Some rules of the games are there, but not on social media.
For sure. I mean, they certainly do. I don't think there's anyone in the world who doesn't think that every news source is biased, right? I've never met anyone in my entire life who thinks that there are unbiased news sources out there. There certainly are not. So every single news source has bias. Every single news source has significant flaws. Some news sources do a way better job than others. But they all are very incomplete, and they all have agendas. And they all will report on certain things and not on things. It's not like the New York Times is ever going to write a bad story about its owners. Like, that will never happen. And so, they're all going to have their own biases. They're all going to have different types of things that they are dealing with. And so you have to triangulate. And certain, traditional news sources are kind of muckrakers, and they're out there just like putting things out, trying to get headlines, trying to get clicks. Certain news sources are more serious, but they still have an agenda. They may have a very, very serious and very important agenda, and sometimes that agenda is stated. Those are the best agendas, at least you know what it is. But often it's not stated at all. There's a lot of, in the United States, there's a lot of companies, news sources that get funded by pharmaceutical companies. So they're unlikely to have a bad story about pharmaceutical companies. Because they'll lose a lot of their advertising and a lot of their funding. And so anyone who accepts advertising has an agenda, because it's one of those things where you often don't want to make your advertisers mad. Social media is the same way. Some of those people have no reach. They have 2,000 Twitter followers. Nobody even knows who they are. There could be a bot. Who knows what they are, and most people don't trust them. And sometimes these bots coordinate, and they can be very effective coordinating, but they're still a smart news consumer should know not to trust them. And sometimes you have well-known people in the U.S. You have folks like Joe Rogan or something like that, and my guess is that he is generally pretty honest and wants to get to the right thing. He has his own ideas and his own opinions about things, but he wants to get to the right answer on stuff because his reputation's on the line, and only his. So if he does something that's egregious or wrong, he will pay for it by losing audience or losing advertisers or whatever else it might be. So he has just as much incentive to do the right thing as a more traditional news organization.
Let me come back to the main issue. How do you see AI shaping economic policies and digital transformation in emerging markets in Pakistan?
Well, I think AI is likely going to affect Pakistan in the short term, much less than many other economies, because, again, I think Pakistan is more reliant on atoms today than bits. And the economies that are more reliant on bits, like the economy of India, is going to be more affected. And in their case, I think it will be affected in a negative way in the short term. And hopefully in the long term, everyone will be affected in a positive way. But as AI is going to affect everything in the long term. It's not something that any of us are going to escape from. And in general, I think it's going to be good, but there is going to be displacements. There are going to be losers. It will certainly be bumpy, and it could cause some strife. And so as a society, a global society, we're going to have to manage it and get through it, and really work on making sure that we use it for the power of good rather than what it also can be used for, which is destruction or other types of things that often we'll see this tension in any type of new technology, whether it's the internet or other types of dual-use technologies that have happened over the years.
So you believe that AI is a blessing, but at the same time, it can become, a challenge for this modern world, because they will take over a lot of jobs. They will take over a lot of market where human involvement will be very less. So it can be a serious threat for humans also.
In the short term, it will have a lot of displacement, and it will have a lot of difficulties for some people. Also have a lot of opportunities for many new people as well. I do think even in the short term, AI will be a net good, but there will be winners and losers for sure as this happens, in both on the individual level, both within companies. There'll be companies that win and lose, and within certain societies and countries. We'll have countries that do better and countries that do poor based on AI. But in the long term, hopefully, it will be a very, very good thing for our society as a whole, and it'll make everyone's life around the world much better. We should have less poverty. We should have less misery. We should have more creativity. We should have more innovation that will happen because of AI.
We are having very interesting discussion with Mr. Auren Hoffman, but we'll take a short break here. We'll join you after this short break. Welcome back. We have with us Mr. Auren Hoffman. So before moving towards that way, we have to be very, very careful as far as AI is concerned.
Well, I think we need to be careful in any new technology that comes out, because any technology can be used for good and for bad. Any new technology can be used as a weapon. And many technologies in the past have been used by weapons, and obviously that's a bad thing. So we want to be able to harness all the good things about AI with as few of the bad things happening. And this is difficult. It's something that we have to navigate as a society. And we have to be conscious about it as a society as well. So it'll help all of us get in a better place.
Right. So towards the very end, I have just two more questions. I just wanted to know that growing concerns about data sovereignty, how should countries balance innovation with security? It's a very serious concern these days.
Yeah, I think it's hard, and it's very, very hard, and it's very hard to figure out. It's very hard to regulate the internet, especially as internet consumers get smarter and smarter. So I believe that Twitter or X is banned in Pakistan, but Twitter has millions and millions of Pakistanis that use it every day. They just use it through a VPN. So the governments only have so much power, and that's especially true in maybe a country like Pakistan, which has a lot of decentralized power, as opposed to like China, where the government has a lot more central power. So it is harder and harder to tell consumers what they're going to do. Most countries can't become like a North Korea, where they literally cut it off. It would lead to a North Korea-like situation where you have devastation and starvation. And it's going to have, if you're going to want to have innovation, if you're going to want to have certain types of prospering things in your economy, you are going to have some level of information transparency. And so governments are going to always have to balance this. And there's a security balance. There's other types of balances that they're going to do. And usually the trade-off is the more security and other types of things on the internet, potentially that could lead to things going slower. And so governments are always going to have to figure out what that trade is. And even if they want to do a certain trade, they may not be capable of regulating it in a way, just because consumers are smart. And if they want to go access something, they can go figure it out.
America is also concerned about TikTok. They recently banned TikTok, mentioned that it's a serious threat to their security. So a country like America is even scared of.
Yeah, every country is trying to figure out their own thing. I mean, TikTok is based in China, but the first country that banned it and regulated it was China. And so in China, you're not allowed to get certain types of things from TikTok. You're not allowed to show certain types of content after 8 p.m. on TikTok. Of course, India banned TikTok itself as well a long time ago. So many countries, and of course, China has banned all American social media. So none of the American social media can interact there. All countries are going to have to figure this out. There's no there's no like obvious solution of what to do. You're always trying to trade off freedom versus security, and you're trying to trade it off in a smart way. And sometimes you'll go too far in one way and you have to come back. Sometimes you go too far in the other way and you have to come back. And these are very, very, very difficult decisions that governments have to make, and they can't always be right. So every once in a while, governments make decisions and they're wrong, and they have to replay it. That's out there. TikTok itself is a very, very complicated one, and the U.S. is working its way through it, and hopefully, and we'll find out. But my guess is that over the next 6 to 12 months, we'll come up with at least a decent solution, and maybe that will solve some things, but not everything, and it'll make some people happy and not everybody happy. And then over the next few years, we'll muddle through it and we'll figure out what is the right path to go forward.
Right. So towards the very end, I want to know that what is your point of view about Pakistan-US collaboration in tech and data sectors, and Auren Hoffman's message for Pakistani entrepreneurs and tech professionals and policymakers?
Well, I'm not an expert on Pakistan. I've spent a total of just a few days in the country. Beautiful country, by the way. And I think more people should go there as tourists because it's such a beautiful place. So
before you comment on, let me ask you that where did you go in Pakistan, and how was your experience?
My experience was amazing. I was in Islamabad and Lahore. These are incredible places with incredible people. The food is just like
amazing.
Amazing, yeah. And the scenery is great. The mountains are beautiful. The colors are gorgeous. So it is. I do think that the country of Pakistan is terrible at marketing. Because before I had gone, I had heard of the beauty. I had never understood how. I knew the food would be good, but that was about it. I didn't understand why it was it's such a great tourist place to go, and so the Pakistanis themselves need to market themselves better to get more people from around the world to check it out.
Very true. So, what is your suggestion, for our tech professionals or entrepreneurs, if not policymakers, if you don't want to touch it? But I would be more happy if you talk about policymakers also, so that they listen to you and realize that what is needed.
I don't know on the policymakers. My guess is that one has to make it easier and easier for people to start companies, and my guess is the hardest thing in Pakistan is that so much of the economy is captured by so few people. And that's true of so many other countries around the world as well. It makes it very hard for a new entrepreneur to attack a market. So if you want to attack the taxi market or the hotel market, or you want to attack the energy market or the healthcare market, if there are interests that are aligned to keep the status quo, and they're very, very politically connected, it makes it difficult. And by the way, that is, even in the U.S., that's hard to do. You have a lot of different types of interests in the U.S. that make it hard, especially in things like national defense and healthcare and housing. It makes it very difficult in the U.S. to attack those markets, but it's more doable here. So as these things get more liberalized in Pakistan and in other countries, it will make it easier for tech entrepreneurs to go into their home market. And the most important thing, if you're a tech founder, is if you're in Pakistan, my guess is to focus on Pakistan. It's a market that you're going to know better than anybody. It's a huge market. Again, the 5th most populous country in the world, 250 million people. At some point, Pakistan will have even more people than the U.S. So it's a very, very, very large market to attack and to prosper in. And you have a unique advantage to being there because you are an expert. You're in that market today. An American entrepreneur is not going to be able to thrive in the Pakistani market.
When are you going to visit Pakistan?
I don't know. I was just there a month ago or so, and we'll see when I come back.
I wish you all the best for your future endeavors. Take good care of yourselves. Thank you so much, Mr. Auren Hoffman, for giving your precious time. I'm truly indebted and grateful that you spared your special time for us, for our program, BOL Adil Abbasi ke saath and BOL TV. I'm really grateful, and inshallah, I will take you in my another show to have your opinion on different subjects. Hopefully, we'll see you in Pakistan soon. तीन नाज़रीन, आपने गुफ्तगू सुनी, ये टैक कंपनीज एंटरप्रेन्योर हैं और टैक कंपनी के ओनर हैं, सक्सेसफुल आदमी हैं अमेरिका के अंदर, और वो बता रहे थे कि अमेरिका में पाकिस्तान में किन सेक्टर्स के अंदर कोलैबोरेशन किया जा सकता है, क्या पॉलिसीज अडॉप्ट करनी होगी, किस तरह मार्केट में स्पेस देनी होगी, कैसे जो है वो पाकिस्तान की जो 25 करोड़ आबादी है उस आबादी को आप फैसिलिटेट कर सकते हैं या वहाँ पर टेक्नोलॉजी ला सकते हैं। पाकिस्तान को या अमेरिका के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में भी जब हम बात कर रहे थे क्या करना चाहिए, कैसे ये दोनों मुल्क आगे बढ़ सकते हैं, ज़ाहिर है उन्होंने थोड़ा अवॉइड किया पॉलिसी मेकर्स पर बात करने से, चाहे वो पाकिस्तान में हो चाहे वो यहाँ पर हो। उन्होंने यहाँ पर भी बताया कि कई हवालों से अमेरिका में भी अभी मुकम्मल तौर पर जो है वो इजाज़त या स्पेस नहीं है काम करने की। खुद पाकिस्तान के हवाले से भी उन्होंने कहा कि बहुत मार्केट बड़ी स्क्वीज हुई हुई है और उस मार्केट में काम करने की बहुत ज़्यादा स्पेस नहीं है। लेकिन क्या स्टेप्स लिए जा सकते हैं, ये वो लोग हैं जो अब फ्यूचर ड्राइव कर रहे हैं किसी भी कंट्री की इकोनॉमी का, या फिर उस कंट्री के डिफेंस का, या फिर उस कंट्री के फ्यूचर को डिटरमिन कर रहे हैं। तो हमें भी जो है वो आईटी सेक्टर पे या टेक्नोलॉजी पे फोकस करने की ज़रूरत है ताकि हम पाकिस्तान की इकोनॉमी को बेटर कर सकें। और हम कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि अमेरिका में जो सक्सेस स्टोरीज हैं, जो सक्सेसफुल लोग हैं, चाहे वो पॉलिटिक्स में हैं, चाहे वो बिजनेस में हैं, चाहे वो टेक्नोलॉजी में हैं, उनके इंटरव्यूज करके आपके सामने रख सकें और आपको बता सकें और समझा सकें कि जो कामयाब दुनिया है उसने ये सफ़र कैसे तय किया है और किन चीज़ों को हमें करने की ज़रूरत है। हमारी तरफ से यही कुछ। आदिल अब्बासी को इजाज़त दीजिए। अल्लाह हाफ़िज़।
सब्सक्राइब करें और बेल दबाएं ताकि कोई खबर रह न जाए।